Hello and welcome to The Bottom Line here on TVP World, where we bring you the most important business and economic stories of the day. I'm your host, Marie Cato. Wednesday, August 6th, marks not only the beginning of Karol Nawrocki's presidency, but a possible season of fiscal and economic change for Poland. This evokes immediate concern, if not tension, within the coalition government led by Prime Minister Donald Tusk. In his report, Jan Kennedy tells us about what might lie around the corner.
Karol Nawrocki was officially sworn in as President of Poland on Wednesday morning, beginning his 5-year term. Although Poland's president doesn't control the country's policy, Nawrocki can propose ideas, and in his first speech as head of state, he made it clear he won't back down from a single one of his 21 campaign promises.
My speech today should not come as a surprise to anyone. I intend to remain consistent and determined in implementing Plan 21.
Central to his plan are ideas related to economic policy, which include cutting personal income tax for families with 2 or more children, raising the second tax threshold, cutting VAT, as well as abolishing the capital gains tax. And according to a Collier's report, these could cost north of €12 billion per year to fulfill. The Polish government has criticised Nawrocki's proposals, which come at a time of heightened spending. On Tuesday, however, Minister of Finance and Economy Andrzej Domański took a more diplomatic tone, simply asking for the math behind the cuts.
Right now, Poland has the highest defense spending among all NATO countries of almost 5% of GDP. We're also increasing funding for healthcare, and we've launched a major investment program under Prime Minister Donald Tusk's government. Any new proposals must come with clear sources of funding.
Already, this increased spending is set to push Poland's public deficit to over 6.2% in 2025, more than double the EU's suggested limit. And economists say the reasoning behind Nawrocki's plan is all but economically viable.
The most likely assessment of what the new president said and did was that he was just trying to construct a certain trap for the government, making proposals that he knows cannot be realized.
And to put things into perspective, Nawrocki's proposals come at a time when most EU countries, even Romania, which in recent years went through a spending surge, are now enacting strict austerity measures to restore fiscal discipline.
The majority of countries want to stabilize their finances, to avoid the cutting of the credit rating, to enhance the public finance.
Time will tell if any of Nawrocki's economic policy proposals will actually materialize, or whether they will all remain political tools.
President Karol Nawrocki has a vision for his 5-year term, and that includes economic and fiscal policy goals. At the end of the day, that's what drew many voters to cast their ballots for him. That's not to say that the economic commitments laid out in his 21 promises don't evoke controversy. To find out whether and how Nawrocki's economic and fiscal agenda aligns with current Polish and European realities, let's welcome Ignacy Morawski, chief economist and deputy editor-in-chief at Polish business daily Puls Biznesu. Hello, and thank you very much for joining us.
Hello, good afternoon.
So obviously it's unlikely that we will get through all the aspects of Nawrocki's economic and fiscal policy plans. But let's just go through some of the broader ideas. So we know that President Nawrocki is looking to be much more hands-on and involved in creating and influencing fiscal policy, and he wants to be more of a decision maker when it comes to these policies, despite the fact that this is not part of his job spec. And I wanted to ask you, how do you see this collaboration with Andrzej Domański, who is the finance and economy minister? And also, in your opinion, how do these numbers actually add up? Is it feasible?
Well, I think that President Karol Nawrocki will not engage heavily into fiscal policy. It is true that during campaign and in interviews after the elections, he mentioned tax cuts as one of his first proposals. So probably he will come up with some ideas and initiatives. However, during his inauguration speech, and this is symptomatic, he did not mention any fiscal measures. He did not mention neither taxes nor spending measures. And I think that he knows, he is aware of the fact that his hand in this area is quite weak, that any costly proposals will be rejected by the parliament, and probably the government will publish assessments that those proposals might be costly for public investments or some public services. So I suspect that Nawrocki will come up with tax proposals, but he is aware of the fact that he is not in a strong position with respect to the government. So this is not the key area of his interest.
The Polish government is determined to boost its military and defence standing, and it's very much associated with that currently in Europe. It wants to continue to spend almost 5.5% of its GDP on defence. So how is the Polish government going to juggle its defence spending at such a crucial time with the campaign promises Nawrocki appears to be absolutely adamant is going to implement? And before you comment on that, let's just have a look at what Domański had to say recently.
Once President Nawrocki brings a draft bill to the table, we'll see what it says and see the sources of funding that it identifies. Right now, we're spending nearly 5% of our GDP on defense, currently more than any other NATO member. When someone presents projects that involve massive spending from the state budget, we need to ask ourselves whether that undermines our ability to use that budget to finance our defense efforts, and thus the security of the people of Poland.
So what are your thoughts on Domański's words and the issue of Poland's defense spending in light of Nawrocki's ambitions?
With what I've just said, that once Karol Nawrocki comes up with tax proposals, with costly fiscal measures, the government will immediately publish assessments that such measures are not feasible, not possible, and will try to engage in communication fighting with the president to kill the projects. I don't expect that any fiscal project by the president will be passed into the law. So to me, it seems that Nawrocki is aware of that. And that's why he didn't mention taxes in his inauguration speech. When it comes to military spending, obviously the budget is very stretched. And we have high deficit, high public debt increase. So the government will struggle with any additional fiscal costs. It's very difficult in Poland now to cut any taxes, very difficult.
So let's just work theoretically with Nawrocki's promises, despite your skepticism. So we hear of zero personal income tax for families with 2 children or more, as well as the abolition of capital gains tax, more commonly known as the Belka tax in Poland. And this obviously sounds very enticing for families, especially those who are living on minimum wages. And there has been criticism that the well-off strata in society will only benefit more. What are your thoughts on that?
Many people who are low earners, so they are in bottom deciles of income distribution and have kids, do not pay income tax in Poland because there are tax deductions from income tax, and moreover there are transfers for children which can be treated as a sort of a fiscal subsidy, right? So in general, people who earn well below the average or below the average pay small taxes in Poland, especially those who have kids, right? So any substantial tax cut is naturally beneficial mainly to high earners who pay taxes. So his tax proposal is beneficial mainly to, I would say, middle or upper middle income class or high earners with kids. That would be the effect. But from what I know, the estimates demonstrate that the cost of his proposals would be 0.5% of GDP, around 0.5% of GDP, which is very high as for one measure, right? So as I said, I don't expect the parliament to pass such law. From political point of view, it will obviously be challenging for the government to decline, to say that we do not want to cut taxes. However, to me, it seems that once Karol Nawrocki proposes any substantial tax cuts, the government will engage in heavy communication, demonstrating that any tax cut is harmful for investment, is harmful for military spending, is harmful for social transfers, and is harmful for budget stability. So that will be a political struggle. But as I said, I maintain that view. His proposals will not be passed into the law.
I just wanted to take a little bit of a U-turn here because Nawrocki did acknowledge Poland's tricky and uncertain fiscal situation, but he made comments and attributed it to the coalition government's mismanagement of investment projects. Do you agree with that? And can you give us examples of what investment projects he is referring to? Obviously, he's suggesting that he will ensure that investment is taken care of, and from that moment onwards, Poland's economy will be back on track, suggesting that his fiscal and economic measures will then be plausible.
Well, public investments and investment in general, investment push, as I can describe that, was the main theme of inauguration speech. So that seems to be a key area of attack, key area of initiative by the president, his main theme of concern. He will engage in that. He announced that he will gather the government or invite the government for the so-called cabinet council, which involves both the government and the president, to discuss public investments. He criticized the government for not going forward with important projects. This was a high-level political speech. It's difficult to pinpoint what exact projects he had in mind, but we can assume that, first of all, he referred to the central airport, which is planned to be built in central Poland. This is a very large and costly project. It was trimmed a little bit by the current government. So the previous government had the larger budget for this project, for the airport. The current government is pushing forward, is going forward with the project, however, with some cuts. So the president probably will introduce the
extended project,
going back to the initial proposal of the airport. The other areas where the government might be vulnerable is the dynamic of spending of EU money. This is a sort of a bit of a disappointment in Polish economy this year. So we were waiting for a large investment impulse. We've observed the inflow of EU money, especially from the recovery fund. So that part of the EU budget, which was especially designed after the COVID pandemic. We received that money in the end after initial struggles between Warsaw and Brussels. However, we do not see that money being spent on large investment projects yet. There are procurement processes going on and administrative processes. So I think that we will see larger investment dynamics. However, currently, when we look at the economy, the dynamics of investment is not very high. So there is a bit of disappointment with investment dynamism. It can be reflected by the fact that the largest Polish construction company, Budimex, last week announced that it is cutting its current year forecast of the amount of contracts received. Right. So in the market, in construction market, but also among economists, there is a bit of disappointment with the dynamics of investments. But I wouldn't agree with what the president said, that the direction of economic policy is bad in general.
Sure.
We see some delays, but the projects are there, they are being realized, and they go forward.
There are estimates suggesting that President Nawrocki's tax breaks, which obviously you think will not come to fruition, will cost the Polish government approximately 50 billion zloty a year, which in other words means GDP percentage points being knocked off. Can you give us an illustration of what this actually translates into in practical terms? And also, is this a certain projection, or is it just political well, I suppose an agenda, political projection? And just for our viewers, as a reminder, let's bring up a visual to give us an idea of what this actually means.
Well, it depends. Who are we talking about? Are we talking about those people who will benefit from tax cuts? Are we talking about public finance? Are we talking about the general economy?
The general economy, like what?
Let's assume that.
Go on.
Well, if we assume that those proposals are passed and go into effect, this will be a demand impulse for the economy. So probably higher growth rate in the short term, but also more inflationary pressures. I suspect that with such large fiscal package, the amount of government bonds issuance will increase substantially, and this may cause foreign investors who buy bonds to become a bit worried about the state of the budget. It may increase the yields on government bonds, so the cost of debt servicing. It can maintain higher interest rates. So basically, I think that introducing large demand impulse into the economy at this moment will not be a beneficial factor. And that's why I suspect that those measures will be rejected by the government and by the parliament.
There are many, many other questions that we have, and obviously this is going to be an ongoing topic. But as we wrap up, I wanted to ask about the president being openly Eurosceptic, and he's made it clear that he doesn't want Poland adopting the euro. Can you just tell us about what that actually means for Poland's position in the EU, especially from a financial point of view? We also know that the multi-annual financial framework hasn't been finalized. So does that have any influence? What do you think of Nawrocki becoming president and how that might impact those final decisions?
Well, I think that Nawrocki is actually in the European mainstream today. There is a widespread skepticism in Europe with regards to further integration. I don't think that any large country at this moment today is favorable to increasing the competence of the European Union. So what Nawrocki exactly said during his speech is that he is pro-EU in the sense that he is in favor of Poland being a member of the European Union. This is like a standard political position among most European and among most political parties in Poland. Polish society is mostly favorable towards EU, so politicians act accordingly. But he said that he is against European Union increasing its competences. And in this regard, I think that he is in the mainstream of European politics today. I don't suspect that the position of the government is substantially different. However, obviously, the devil is in the details, and how will he approach relations with Brussels? This is the area where government leads the policy. It's not the president, right? Sure. So in most areas regarding relations with the EU. However, obviously, the president can interfere in the process. And the question is whether he will, in any regard, interfere in an important way in government relations with the European Union, whether he will assume a very, I would say, hostile position towards European Union. It may influence the amount, from purely economic point of view, it may influence the amount of money that Poland receives from the EU budget. Because as we know, the next European budget will be constructed on the assumption that there is money in exchange for friendly reforms.
Okay, we're going to have to park our conversation there.
The government will not have money.
Okay, we'll be talking about this for many weeks to come. Ignacy Morawski, Chief Economist and Deputy Editor-in-Chief at Polish business daily Puls Biznesu. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
And that concludes the bottom line for today. I was your host, Marie Cato. We bring you the best of regional business Monday to Friday at 5:10 CET on TVP World. And in the meantime, for the latest in regional business, follow us on X and on tvpworld.com. Goodbye.